we are understanding the role that stress plays, the role of our adrenals in relation to this. What is HPA axis dysfunction? The root causes of HPA axis dysfunction, light and melatonin, the relationship of that, and then the three main stages of adrenal fatigue or adrenal dysfunction that I see women in when I work with them. My name is Skiddon. I am a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner specializing in women's hormones and gut health. Have you heard of the term adrenal fatigue? Or maybe you've seen videos online of high and low cortisol. Does any of this ring a bell or resonate with you? Leave a yes in the chat if so. Well, we're going to be going deeper into that because what is an adrenal support challenge without understanding what our adrenals do? Before that, let's backtrack to stress. Because stress is the number one causal factor. 70 to 80% of all doctors' visits are for some stress-related illness. What's important to note here is that not all stress is stress from life. There's many different types of stress that one experiences. My question for you is to just think about right now, what do you think about when you hear the word stress? Do you think work, life? Are you thinking bad, good? What really comes to mind when you hear about stress? We are going to understand our adrenals. What are they? They are tiny, right over here on this image here, thumb-shaped glands that sit on top of your kidneys. They are connections of the brain because they are neural tissue, actually. This means they act very fast, like that. And what happens is they receive a message from your brain in response to a stimulus in your environment. Oftentimes, this will cause you to release cortisol, the adrenals to release cortisol. In fact, acting situations, this is adrenaline. And your body responds to this threat by increasing your blood sugar levels. And today, we are going to understand what this HPA axis is so that you can understand where you are at. You're also going to learn what causes this cortisol HPA axis dysregulation. Why? Because when you know the cause, that's when you can begin to remedy. That's when you can begin to nourish, to support, to nurture. Because knowledge, awareness, ignorance is not bliss when it comes to supporting our body. And my goal is for you to, in these 3 days, have those aha moments where you recognize, oh, I've been doing this for so long that I didn't even realize that it's causing further dysregulation in my body. And you must know that your body is not broken. It is doing the best, the absolute best that it can, given the resources, given the support, given the nourishment that it has. And our goal is to give it more of what it needs. Type a yes in the chat if you are ready for this. One thing before we leave this slide is I want you to understand when we look at the hypothalamus, the HPA axis right here, you also see that the thyroid and the ovaries are right here. So this goes to show that this axis does not work independently. So if something's happening up here, the connection to your thyroid, to your ovaries, it's all connected. All right. So your HPA axis is your body's stress response. Your H, which is your hypothalamus, signals to your P, your pituitary gland, which signals to your adrenals, which release cortisol in response to a stressor that's going on in your environment. So while medically there isn't a term for the word adrenal fatigue because they haven't stopped working, there are rare autoimmune illnesses called Cushing's or Addison's. So this is where you are producing far too much cortisol in one case, and the other is where you aren't producing enough. Can I be really honest with you for a second? Type a yes in the chat if I can be really honest with you. Reminder that chat participation is how you get entered into our giveaway, which is our 10-week high-level signature program that's life-changing. I'm going to be really honest with you, because if you go to a doctor and say, I have adrenal fatigue, they are going to say, that is not a real thing. And what I want you to know is that how you feel is 100% real and it needs to be evaluated. So this HPA axis that I'm showing you, it's responsible for your energy levels throughout your day. It's responsible for your metabolism, for your mood, your motivation, along with your immune system, having healthy ovulation. And I want you to think of a time in your life where you got really sick and you knew that the reason that you got sick was because of stress. Can you think of a time in your life like this? If so, type yes in the chat. And that's because of the connection with your immune system. And so, what happens with us women is that we can go through a time in our life, think we were totally fine, and then months go by, and that's when we start to notice some inflammation. So, this can look like reflux, this can look like bloating, indigestion. Maybe your sleep has just gotten worse. You're waking up multiple times in the middle of the night and you don't understand why. Maybe you're having chronic migraines the week before leading to your period. So, in your luteal phase, your energy has been shot through the ground. And that's one reason that you are here. Well, this is because our body will put us through a more adrenaline based state to get through the stress. And in short periods of time, we can handle this. But when it's going on for long periods of time, the body is not wired to be able to respond to stress chronically. So, one example that everyone has lived through here is the pandemic. And, you know, you're home for 2 weeks, and the 2 weeks then becomes 2 months. The 2 months, now you're 8 months, a year into it. And initially, you may have been coping just fine. But when I speak to women, this topic, this period of their life often becomes brought up again because they recognize that later on that year, their symptoms had been exacerbated. So whether now you're spotting during your bleed, or you're having chronic migraines, or your digestion is a mess, maybe your skin's acting up. However, the inflammation is showing up for you in your body. Type a yes in the chat if you hear what I am putting down. Give me a yes. Next slide. Now, you need to understand cortisol before I ask you your thought process on whether it's good or bad. And here's the truth. We absolutely need cortisol because its secretion follows a diurnal rhythm. And I'm going to show you on this chart right here. So, when you wake up, cortisol gradually rises to help you get out of bed. And then it peaks about an hour after you get up. In the afternoon, it drops. And right before bed, it's at its lowest point to help you get your deepest, most restorative sleep throughout your night. And then, because you're not eating anything at night to help increase your blood sugar, it pushes blood sugar out. And that's why it rises back up. And this secretion of cortisol can be altered by stress, illness, changes in your sleep pattern. And now you can take a look at melatonin, which is your sleep hormone, and it has this inverse relationship with cortisol. And so we can see that when cortisol is high, melatonin is low during the day, and melatonin rises as you get ready for bed. And between those key hours of deep cellular repair, that 2 to 10 to 2 window, it's at its peak and then it goes back down. Now, for a woman who is feeling tired but wired, she's feeling burnt out. It's the end of the day and she knows she's tired, but she simply cannot fall asleep. Her cortisol right here, when it's supposed to be low, can be much higher. And melatonin signaling can also be off, which we are going to be discussing later today. I want to chat more about the symptoms of high and low before we go into the root causes of HPA axis dysfunction. And so, yes, we talked about the difficulty falling asleep. You're probably also likely waking up around 3 a.m. in the morning because you're having your blood sugar drop too low. What else does this look like? You're gaining weight around your belly. You're having digestive issues. And this is no surprise, whether that's bloating, whether that's reflux, whether that's indigestion, whether that's alternating between diarrhea and constipation day in and day out. Here's why. Stress shuts down digestion. So if your body is in its fight or flight, rest and digest state, it cannot digest food. And what this means is you are running out of the house in the morning, grabbing a granola bar and getting out the door. This looks like standing and eating your food. This looks like gulping down your food and not taking the time to chew thoroughly. They say that you are what you eat, and what I say is you are what you digest. Because when you bring your body into a state where it can absorb the nutrients of the food that you're eating, that's when you're serving your body best. Otherwise, what's the point of eating all the healthy food if your body's not able to absorb it? Now, low cortisol, I'm actually going to show you this next page to show you what this looks like. This is a test result from a Dutch test, which is a urine test where you pee on a strip 4 times a day that I use in my practice. For our example today, pretend that these are saliva values. So let's say we're working together and you get this test sent to your home. You have your 4 little containers of saliva. You're spitting once when you wake up in the morning into a tube. The next tube is about an hour to 2 hours after. Then you spit once in the afternoon into your tube, collect your saliva, and your last sample is right before you go to bed. And in this image, you can see the high range limit, and you can also see the low range limit. And so naturally, you want your cortisol to be somewhere in between. Now, for someone who has low cortisol in the morning, you can see that the waking cortisol is below the low range limit. This looks like dragging yourself out of bed. So for this person, they are quite literally dragging themselves out of bed no matter how many hours of rest she gets the night before. She wakes up groggy, not well rested, and is dragging herself consciously to get out of bed and get moving. But once she gets moving, you can see she's fine. Once she gets moving, she's fine. But back in the afternoon, there's a big dip in her energy. And you can see that the cortisol is low here. So this looks like grabbing for something, a pick-me-up in the afternoon. Then just about nighttime, this result is normal. But again, we talked about the wired and tired. Well, then it's likely up here, the result for that. Craving salty foods is also quite common when you have low cortisol because cortisol regulates your sodium, and we're going to be talking more about that on day 2 on your minerals. And when cortisol is low, there will not be enough sodium retention in the body. Now we're going to go on to the root causes of HPA axis dysfunction. So as a reminder, that's the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And the first one is by no surprise the cortisol blood sugar connection. And it's also it is such an impactful way of creating radical change where you notice it within a few short weeks, the difference in your energy and your mood. Because if you don't have this right, this causes a cascade of issues downstream. And it won't just be your cortisol. Because remember, when we look back at how everything's interconnected, and I have a beautiful diagram to show you tomorrow, but you'll also see the connection with your sex hormones, your estrogen, progesterone, and your testosterone. Okay, cortisol, this is like your body's stress response, stress hormone. It helps your body deal with the challenges like when you're nervous or you're excited. But too much cortisol can be like having your machine, it's revved up all the time, which is not good. Then you have insulin, which I want you to think of this as the key that unlocks your body's cells so that they can use sugar from your food for energy. Right over here. It's super important for keeping your energy levels steady. And now your blood sugar. This is the fuel your body runs on when you eat. Your body breaks down food into sugar, which goes into your blood to give you energy. And here's how they're all connected for simplicity's sake. So if you're stressed a lot or you have high cortisol, it can make your body release extra sugar into your blood. This can be like, for example, pouring too much fuel into your machine, causing your blood sugar levels to just spike. This is high blood sugar is when there's too much sugar in your blood releases insulin to help your cells use that sugar. But if this happens too often, your body can become less sensitive to insulin, like the key is not working as well, and this is called insulin resistance. Cortisol manages your blood sugar. When it goes low, it raises it. So when your blood sugar is low, cortisol raises it. So this means, this is the key right here, the more unstable your blood sugar is, the more your adrenals have to compensate. And your blood sugar just goes on this roller coaster up and down, up and down, up and down. And so we see this balance zone over here. When your blood sugar goes too low, hypoglycemia, insert cortisol to rise it again. And how does this happen? A high carb diet. That's your roller coaster of blood sugar from the cookies, from the processed sugars, from the pastas. And this is not assuming that it's a balanced pasta with protein and fat and fiber to support and nurture your blood sugar. Because of all of this, naturally, blood sugar dysregulation is one of the 4 main root causes of HPA axis dysfunction. The second one is inflammation. And when we talk about nourishing our HPA axis, we also recognize that this means supporting our gut microbiome, supporting our endocrine system, supporting our nervous system, and creating this resiliency in our body. And I love this image by Dr. Jockers, because it showcases all these different parts of our body. We've got the thyroid, we've got our GI tract, we've got our kidneys. But what's important to understand, if there's inflammation in one area, it impacts the other areas as well. We are not simply isolating parts. And a simple way to go back to this example is when we look at the gut and stress connection, how your adrenals are releasing cortisol, but then that's impacting your GI tract right over here. And this is also why I'm not a fan of quick fixes. When we're working on one thing, we're working on all the other parts together. And one thing I want to mention before we go on to the next HPA axis dysfunction piece is that this inflammation, well, you can say that the inflammation number 2 is also connected to your blood sugar as well. So there's an interconnected link there, because the more wobbly your blood sugar is, that's going to drive inflammation in your body. And we also know, for example, if we look at the health of our gut, we know that opportunistic bacteria like to thrive on carbs, sugars. And so again, another way to link those two together. Emotional stress. At the start, we discussed different types of stress, and here's a quick overview of our stress response. Brain signals the adrenals, which secrete cortisol. And if this pathway between the adrenals, the brain adrenals secreting cortisol to our body becomes inefficient because it's constantly being stimulated, this leads to a level of dis-ease, lack of ease in the body. And as humans, our external environment impacts us very deeply. So I want to ask you a question, which is, have you ever felt anxious about an event or situation that's past in your life? So you're replaying an event that's happened and that's leading you to feel anxious, or you're feeling anxious and stressed out in anticipation of an upcoming event in your life. So take a moment to think about that. Type a yes in the chat if this is you. Your heart rate, it speeds up, your palms, they might get sweaty, your chest can feel heavy just in anticipation of the event alone. And here's why. Because your brain, it doesn't know the difference between an actual experience in your life and just thinking about the experience. Neurochemically, it's the same. And that is why I've put number 3, emotional stress is one of the root causes of HPA axis dysfunction. Here's something cool for you to know today. And it is that when your grandmother was carrying your mom, you were a tiny egg inside your mother's ovaries. And this is because a female fetus, she is born with all the eggs she'll ever have in her lifetime. And so your cells are a product of everything your your grandmother experienced when your mother was in her womb and what your mother experienced. And I really want to hone in on this is that you are not what happened to you yesterday. You are not what's happening to you next week. You are even more than that. And so we need to have a deep level of compassion and grace as we approach our healing journey, to be kind to yourself. Because while the body has innate wisdom, you need to give it the resources to support it and nurture it and nourish it. The fourth root cause of HPA axis dysfunction is circadian rhythm dysregulation, which is also a topic that we are going to be diving deeper into tomorrow, which I'm excited for. We had a similar image, but this one is different. In the red, you can see cortisol rising in the morning, going down at night, and rising again. And you see melatonin working inversely. So melatonin, low, it rises at night and goes back down. Your adrenals, they have a lot to do with your sleep, particularly your sleep hormone melatonin. Why? Well, because there's this inverse relationship that I've shown you between cortisol and melatonin. And your body is also intelligently designed to operate this way. Because when melatonin is at its highest at night, this is what's allowing for physical repair, for psychological repair, for it to clean out different processes in your body. And we also see here it's saying wind down, dim the lights. And I'm going to show you the connection between light and melatonin for this reason on the next slide. So here's a visual. Let's break it down a little bit. We've got light and dark. We've got the eye. We've got the suprachiasmatic nucleus. We've got your pineal gland. So this is a visual of light coming into your retina. So when light comes into your retina, it's going to inhibit melatonin production. Light travels through the retina to an area of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which triggers the pineal gland, which is right over here, to shut down melatonin production. If we are getting too much light exposure, our pineal gland is going to make sure we do not secrete too much melatonin. That's how it works. Why is this important? This means that if we want to have deep, restful sleep at night, we want to make sure that at least at least an hour before bed, we stimulate this area of the brain to produce melatonin. How do we do that? We we shut down the lights. We avoid lights. We grab a eye mask to go to bed so that light is not coming into your eyes, because even this much light exposure triggers the pineal gland to stop producing your sleep hormone melatonin, which you need for deep sleep. Here's a quick test that you can do at home at night to know that if it's dark enough for you in your room. All you do is put your hand out in front of you. If you can see your hand, it's not dark enough. As I log off, I'm going to say I'm sending you so much love wherever you are. And most definitely, I look forward to seeing your posts in the Facebook group. Have a fantastic rest of your day or rest of your night.
I wanna know your name. Baby, you're bubbly and radiant. You got some flavor and I'm trying to savor it. Palm gripped on the fruit.